Revenge with Karen.
I assume you're joking, I said, staring at the founder's daughter like she'd just farted in the Vatican. Nope, she chirped, like she was announcing free cupcakes. My husband's cousin gets your office. Pack your things. That's the moment I knew they were going to burn the building down with their own stupidity and then try to sue the ashes. I'd spent 12 years holding this circus together with duct tape, zoning permits, and coffee-fueled legal footnotes. Here came Chalum Barbie with a fresh balayage and big brand energy, kicking me out like I was a soggy couch on move-out day. And you know what I said? Perfect. No dramatics. No tears, just that one word. Then I stood up, collected my planner, my framed certificate from the Department of Environmental Compliance, and a potted snake plant I'd nursed back from death during the 2020 furloughs. I didn't even bother to clear the whiteboard, let them try to decode 12 years of color-coded chaos. I walked past the HR rep, blinking like a deer caught between policies, and out the front doors, down the steps, and across the street to the quiet little storefront I'd leased the month before. Before we get deeper into the dumpster fire of delusion, you're about to witness, quick thing, if you're listening and haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button. 95% of y'all are riding shotgun on these stories without subscribing, and it really helps the team keep churning out these petty masterpieces. Toss in a like too, if your thumb isn't broken. All right, back to the story. It had started like any other Monday from hell. The kind where your email pings before your coffee finishes brewing, and you already know it's going to be someone asking you to jump on a quick call to discuss something idiotic. But this time, calendar invite hit different, subject line, leadership transition touchpoint. Location, HR's glass fishbowl of doom, and the sender, Madison Ann Reynolds, freshly returned from her sabbatical where she'd allegedly found herself in a penchant for manifesting through crystal therapy. She didn't even sit down when I entered. Just stood there in a blazer that probably cost more than my Honda, hands clasped like she was about to lead prayer. So, big picture, she began. She was pitching a makeover segment on daytime TV. We're pivoting toward a more future-forward compliance presence. The board agrees this is a chance to freshen the tone, make it more approachable. Her words smelled like pink wine and marketing jargon. I waited. That's why, starting Friday, my husband's cousin Bryce will be stepping into your role. We're really excited about the energy he's bringing in. He's been working with startups, super intuitive guy. Already has ideas about using AI for zoning workflows, so we'll need your office cleared out by Monday. And there it was, Bryce, the same guy who once asked me if the EPA still mattered and who once called OSHA a vibe killer. The same dude who thought permits were just old-school red tape and told a colleague that stormwater runoff rules were probably fake. He was taking over, because of course he was. I looked around the room, Char still pretending they weren't in over their heads, Madison looking like she expected a tearful exit or a Hallmark card, and me. I just smiled. Not the fake kind, either. The real kind, the smile you wear when you've already moved your chess piece 2 turns ago, and now you're just watching the board catch up. Perfect, I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder. They didn't know it, but the moment she said, pack your things, she'd handed me the detonator, because what Madison didn't realize, what no one in that room knew, was that 10 days prior, I had officially removed myself as the company's designated compliance officer. Filed, notarized, timestamped. And when the city's licensing system did its next audit, oh honey, they were going to wish I'd just flipped that whiteboard one last time. 2 months earlier, I sat in my office, the only light coming from my screen and the flickering bulb they never got around to replacing, even after 3 work orders and a passive-aggressive sticky note. It was 10:37 p.m., and I was reading an email chain that could get someone indicted. Spoiler, that someone wasn't going to be me. Subject, follow-up, emissions audit, Q2. The trail was grim. I'd requested the raw emissions data from our fleet 6 times. The vendor's report had been flagged as incomplete by the independent verifier. Our clean air certification, which was due for renewal, needed a finalized audit, but the data never arrived. Just excuses. Silence. Then one reply from our procurement guy, Tommy with the vape pen and superiority complex, who said, and I quote, I think we're fudging it a little, but not in like a bad way. You know what's never a good idea? Fudging your emissions reports when your biggest client is the goddamn Port Authority. I forwarded the chain up the ladder, straight to Madison, who at that point was still finding herself in the jungles of Chalum. But her assistant replied, chirpy as always, Hi Jennifer. Maddie says this feels a bit intense for her current bandwidth. Can interns help with this? Interns, for emissions compliance. That's like asking your barista to do your taxes because they smiled at you once. I knew right then that I was screaming into a vacuum. Nobody was going to fix this, not unless it landed on the front page of a scandal blog with a headline like Logie Nest fudges emissions while founder's daughter does yoga in the rain. So I got quiet. Not defeated, strategic. I printed everything. Every email, every red flag, every digital shrug. I started keeping 2 sets of files, one for the company, one for me. My personal binder swelled like a Thanksgiving belly. Audit gaps. Expired zoning notices, memos marked urgent that had never been opened. I even made copies of the notes left on my desk by whistleblowers too scared to speak up. Fleet Hash 22 hasn't had DEF fluid for months. Warehouse 3, still using the old waste disposal chute, SHHH. They didn't know I'd noticed. They never do. That's the thing about people like Madison. They assume quiet women with perfect attendance and practical shoes are just office wallpaper, not realizing we've been listening, counting, logging, preparing. I started going into the office on Saturdays, not to catch up, oh no, to plan. There's something chilling about watching a company walk toward a cliff with its eyes shut, like seeing a family pose for a Christmas photo in front of a gas leak. You want to shout, but then you realize, let them. One night, I stood in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, not defeated, not weak. Tired. 12 years of being the firewall between this company and catastrophe. The compliance custodian, the zoning whisperer. The one who held the whole thing together while Bryce played beer pong and Madison rebranded the culture. And I asked myself one question: if they won't listen, do they deserve to burn? That's when I made the call, not to a lawyer, my lawyer, asked about removing myself from the official records. Cleanly, legally, quietly. He told me exactly how to do it, and I did. 1 document, 4 signatures. Stamped, sealed, submitted. They'd never even look at it, but the city's automated system would. Eventually. And when that happened, I wouldn't need to say a damn word. The paperwork would speak for itself. The funny thing about landmines is, if you do it right, they won't hear the click until it's too damn late. The withdrawal letter was 2 pages long. Terse, clinical. Not a single wasted word. I filed it through the city's compliance portal first, with all the right boxes ticked, and a notarized timestamp glowing like a silent countdown. Then I blind copied my personal attorney, archived the receipt, and leaned back in my chair like a woman lighting her last cigarette in a gas station bathroom. Then came the email. Subject line: designation withdrawal effective immediately. I sent it to legal at Loginistio and CC'd the internal compliance chain. No drama, no bold font. Just one line that mattered. Effective immediately, I resign as designated compliance custodian and zoning liaison of record for Logie Nest Technologies, pursuant to Municipal Code 22-14B and Title Roman 9, Section 44. I even included a handy PDF attachment with my notarized signature, just in case someone down the line decided to play dumb. And then I waited. 3 days. Nothing. No reply from the General Counsel. No thanks for your service from HR. Not even a Slack message from Madison's flunky, wondering what Title Roman 9, Section 44 meant. Because they didn't open it. I know they didn't, because I marked the file with a tracking beacon. One of those little metadata worms lawyers use to catch document leaks. The only entity that opened it was the City of San Regan's Business Services server. At 4:03 p.m., company still blissfully asleep at the wheel. I smiled, not the evil villain grin you see in cartoons. This was quieter, colder, the smile of someone who just put on her coat and walked out of the building while the gas leak hissed in the basement. The next morning, I came in early, before the intern with the Hydro Flask Army, and before Madison's cousin could plug in his ring light for whatever thought leadership podcast he was pretending to launch. Printed the letter on heavy bond paper, the kind that smells like courtroom drama, slid it into a red folder, taped it shut with a sticker that said signed and filed. Then I walked down the hall and placed it neatly, deliberately, into the founder's physical inbox, not his email, his real, walnut-paneled, leather-cornered inbox. He was old school like that. Thought paper carried weight, said digital signatures were for cowards. I figured if he ever got curious, he'd find it there, probably on a slow Friday, once the fire had already started. On the way back to my desk, I passed Bryce in the break room, practicing his executive nod in the reflective window. This was a man who didn't know the difference between a zoning variance and a parking permit, but he was already making noise about modernizing the whole compliance function using AI and NFTs. I could have warned him. Could have said, hey, maybe check the org chart before you start signing off on environmental reviews with no authority. But I didn't. Because why stop a man from paddling headfirst into a waterfall when he's singing? By lunch, I'd cleared out half my desk. By 3 p.m., I'd scheduled my exit consultation with HR and put in a request to transfer my remaining vacation payout to my HSA. We're all too busy fussing over Madison's mood boards and Q4 color palettes to notice. The trap was set. The wire was taut. The city's review system typically ran its audit sweep once a quarter. I'd already missed the last one by a week. But the next, that one would hurt. Because when a company files public contracts with the Port Authority, they're required to show continuous designation of a registered compliance officer. No gaps. No substitutes. No Bryces. The moment the system cross-checked their filings and saw my name gone with no replacement, the permits would freeze, the licenses would void, the auto flag would trigger, and the city, they don't send emails, they send inspectors. Bryce made his grand entrance like he was stepping onto a tech stage nobody invited him to. Collared shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal a gold chain that screamed boat party felony, plus that smug little Bluetooth earpiece he wore like a badge of honor, constantly blinking, even when he wasn't on a call. Which, spoiler alert, he never was. First words out of his mouth, not hello, not thanks for the opportunity. No. He walked into the compliance bullpen, clapped once like an off-brand Tony Robbins, and said, time to disrupt the bureaucracy, folks. I wish I were making that up. Back when I still worked there, kept the office organized like a war room, zoning binders, permit ledgers, compliance calendars marked in blood-red Sharpie. Every box labeled, every file logged, because one missing timestamp could shut down a warehouse or cost us a 6-figure fine. Bryce, he looked at it like we'd just shown him a VCR and asked him to program the time. This is all analog, he said, frowning like the paper offended him. Let's get rid of it. I'm going full digital. AI dashboards, smart workflows, real-time auto-cert logic. He dumped 12 years of records into banker boxes and shoved them into a janitor closet. One of the newer analysts, Maria, sharp kid, asked where he planned to store the original zoning blueprints. He blinked. The what? The what? That was day 1. By day 3, the team had unofficially dubbed him Captain Compliance. Not out of respect, out of sheer survival humor. Spent meetings using phrases like synergizing the permit stack and disrupting inspection fatigue, which don't mean anything unless you're writing Mad Libs for a corporate retreat. Worse, he kept bragging about this big Port Authority deal. Once I close this thing, we're golden. Legacy workflows won't even matter. We'll have leverage. Leverage. The man thought a compliance designation was like a Twitter blue check, something you could buy and forget about. Meanwhile, my name was still attached to the Port Authority files he was so giddy about. But I'd already withdrawn, on record, on file, on every damn system that mattered. He hadn't even submitted his own designation. Probably didn't even know what a designation was. The staff, they weren't blind. I still got texts from my old team. Whisper updates from the trenches. Bryce just called the zoning board a rubber stamp, asked if environmental clearance was optional if we didn't advertise. He tried to ping the fire marshal on LinkedIn. I read them from a quiet little cafe across the street, the Grindhouse. Best oat milk latte in town, window seat view of the entrance to Logie Nest HQ. Every morning, I'd sit there. Sip. Watch. Saw Bryce walk in late, shades on, latte in hand like he was starring in a startup docuseries no one was filming. Had no idea what was coming. None of them did, because they thought I'd left empty-handed. But what I took with me was worth more than my snake plant and retirement mug. I took the legal linchpin, the one they never read, the one they never replaced. And every single morning that passed, I knew we were one step closer to detonation. They were building their castle on a sinkhole, and I was already measuring the crater. The moment Bryce signed that expansion proposal, might as well have thrown a lit cigarette into a fireworks factory. Except this wasn't just loud, it was legal, and the fallout would be radioactive. He strutted into that weekly planning meeting like he'd just invented municipal code. Slammed the folder on the table with this big dramatic flair, like it was some kind of power move instead of a compliance time bomb. Inside, a fresh application to expand Logie Nest's South Terminal warehouse, complete with projected square footage, equipment upgrades, and a laughably vague section on emissions impact. No environmental clearance attached. No soil runoff report. No updated stormwater discharge sheet. Nothing but vibes and recycled buzzwords. And right there on the signature line, Bryce T. Renshaw, authorized officer. God bless that man's confidence, because he hadn't filed the paperwork. Not with the city, not with the port, not with anyone. Was never designated, never approved, never recorded. But there his signature sat, as smug and fake as the Hermes belt he wore over his khakis. See, when I withdrew as designated compliance custodian, the city required a replacement be filed, signed, certified, and uploaded to their database within 30 business days. That didn't happen, because nobody even read my damn withdrawal. So when Bryce listed himself as authorized officer on the application, city's digital intake system flagged it instantly. Not a red alarm, just a quiet little hiccup in the back end, an ID mismatch, a designation gap. It landed in the queue of a city licensing clerk named Dave. I know his name because I met him once, at a boring as hell zoning conference that served warm soda and expired granola bars. We bonded over hating our jobs and loving paper trails. The guy's a stickler. Likes things lined up, numbered, and triple stamped. Dave noticed the discrepancy. He didn't blow a whistle yet, just clicked review required and moved the application into pending status. Then he added a note, no active compliance officer on file per Article 7, Section 3. One click, one line, that was all it took. The timer had officially started. Back at Logie Nest, Bryce was doing victory laps. Literally, he walked around the office telling people the expansion was practically a done deal. Even posted a selfie from the rooftop with the caption, "Big moves, bigger footprint." #NextGen Logistics. Meanwhile, the staff was side-eyeing each other like extras in a horror movie who just heard the first creak upstairs. One analyst pulled the fire safety file and whispered to a coworker, "Did we even update the stormwater map from Phase 1? Another quietly Googled what happens if your environmental clearance lapses mid-contract. And across the street was watching. From the grindhouse, as usual, same window seat, oat milk latte, perfect view of the entrance. When the city clerk forwarded the flagged application to his supervisor for escalation, I got the ping. Not because I hacked anything I didn't have to. The Public Records API still had me subscribed to compliance alerts for Logie Nest. They never removed me. I took a sip of my drink and opened a fresh page in my notebook. Wrote one word, boom, because now it wasn't a matter of if the city would act. It was when. The Port Authority had already been twitchy about emissions data. Their contract renewal required verified third-party compliance sign-off, and I was no longer that party. Bryce had just attached his name to a lie, one that would get bounced back through 3 layers of regulatory oversight before anyone in that office even realized they'd stepped into traffic. Tick. Tock. I thought I was sipping coffee and reminiscing, but I was counting down. The call came on a Wednesday morning, just as I was pouring the last bit of oat milk into my coffee. The grindhouse was quiet, half empty, a rainstorm flirting with the windows. My phone lit up with an unknown number that started with the area code for the Port Authority's Compliance Division. I smiled before I even answered. Jennifer speaking. There was a pause, kind of pause that means someone just realized they're not standing on solid ground. Hi, this is Denise McCall from the Port Authority's Environmental Compliance Office. We're reviewing historical documentation on Logie Nest Technologies emissions reporting, and your name is listed as the signing compliance officer on the last 3 cycles. We had some questions about follow-up documentation from the most recent submission. Let the silence linger just long enough for her to feel the tension build. "Oh," I said, cool as a winter draft. "I'm no longer with Logie Nest." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear her flipping through her binder, pen frozen midair. "I wasn't notified of that change," she said carefully. "I'm not surprised," I replied, "but it's official." I submitted my formal withdrawal on April 18th, filed through the city portal, and emailed to Logie Nest's legal team. I can forward you the signed withdrawal notice if needed. Denise cleared her throat. "Yes, please send that over immediately." I already had the email open before she finished the sentence. Attached the notarized PDF, added a short note with the reference number and the filing timestamp. Hit send. The moment that email left my outbox, I knew exactly what would happen. Because Denise wasn't just any compliance officer. She was the kind that highlighted clauses in 3 colors and kept sticky tabs by month. She was meticulous, exacting, and allergic to legal ambiguity. And now, she had a gap, a missing link, a designated compliance officer who no longer existed on record, which meant every submission filed by Logie Nest since April was under scrutiny, including Bryce's precious expansion application and the active port contract renewal. Meanwhile, across the street at Logie Nest HQ, Madison was elbows deep in glitter and bullshit. The lobby smelled like vanilla candles and PR desperation. She'd booked a photographer, hired an event planner, and was workshopping hashtags like #NextNest and #FutureFirst. They were printing tote bags for a rebranding party. He had no idea that her biggest client was now digging through a binder that had her cousin's name plastered across falsified signatures like kick me signs on a school bully's back. I didn't need to do anything but watch. The grindhouse had started to feel like a front row seat at a slow-motion train wreck. Every text I got from former colleagues confirmed what I already suspected. Bryce says the port signed the deal. Madison just approved a neon sign for the rebrand wall. He doesn't even have a copy of the last emissions log. Tick, tock. That day, Denise replied to my email. One sentence. Thank you. Our legal team will be initiating follow-up. And just like that, the fuse hit the powder. Because the Port Authority doesn't do friendly chats when it comes to compliance violations. They do audits, investigations, hold payments, suspend contracts, and the one thing they never do, ignore a compliance officer who vanishes without replacement. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. The rain had started tapping on the windows like a countdown clock. The trap was set. Every binder, every timestamp, every signature was now a live wire waiting to electrocute the next person who touched it. And across the street, they were too busy picking fonts and florals to realize the floor was about to collapse. October 3rd, 4:57 p.m. Logie Nest HQ buzzed like a frat house before finals. Bryce was pacing in the glass-walled conference room, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, collar unbuttoned for maximum executive energy. The team was crammed around the long table, eyes flicking between the giant flat screen and Bryce's increasingly frantic clicking. This was his big moment, the final submission, the crown jewel of his imaginary compliance kingdom. He smacked the touchpad with flourish, turning to the room with arms raised like he'd just landed a space shuttle. Submitted, boom, certified, we're back in business, baby. Applause followed, awkward, scattered. The kind that says we're clapping so we don't get fired. On the screen, confirmation of the company's annual operating certification renewal filed with the city of San Regan. What wasn't on the screen? The compliance custodian letter. One required by law to verify that the person filing had the legal authority to do so. The one that only a designated, registered compliance officer could attach. The one Bryce didn't even know existed, because he never submitted his designation, because he never read the internal handbook, because he thought the word compliance just meant typing in all caps and making spreadsheets with colorful graphs. And at 5:01 p.m., exactly 1 minute after Bryce slammed that digital gavel, the city of San Regan's licensing system did what it always does, ran its automated cross-checks. Missing designation? Check. No authorized custodian on file? Check. Mismatch between submitted authority and registered personnel? Check. The backend flagged the discrepancy as a critical error. The city's response wasn't dramatic. It was bureaucratic. System triggered a stop work order for Logie Nest's main operating license. The system didn't scream. It didn't even blink. It just quietly stamped the order, assigned an inspector, and scheduled dispatch for 8:00 a.m. the next morning. Digitally posted, official, binding, and Bryce, still fist-bumping interns and doing victory laps down the hall. Meanwhile, Madison was sipping a grapefruit spritzer under a string of fairy lights in the lobby. She just posed for a selfie next to a custom-made backdrop that said from legacy to luminary, Logie Nest 2.0. That morning, a popular startup blog had published a fluff piece titled The Family That's Reinventing Logistics, with a photo of Madison and Bryce standing in front of the HQ, beaming like Silicon Valley royalty. The irony, that article had gone mildly viral in their niche. Shares, reposts, congratulatory LinkedIn comments from people who definitely didn't read past the headline. They were trending hours before implosion. I watched it all from my cafe window. The light hit their building just right as the sun dipped, casting long shadows across the entryway where in 12 hours, a laminated orange stopwork sign would be duct-taped over the door like a scarlet letter. I knew the inspector by name. Martin. Stickler. Always on time. Always took photos. Always wore those aviators like he was about to read Miranda rights to a warehouse manager. I already imagined the scene. Bryce, pulling in late in his Tesla, music blaring. Madison, flouncing and wearing a new branded hoodie for the rebrand. And Martin, waiting with clipboard in hand and a calm smile that said, "You should read the fine print." The dominoes had all been lined up. And now, the first one had tipped. Monday morning cracked open like a beer can at a funeral. Loud, inappropriate, and just a little bit tragic. 7:58 a.m., I was parked across the street in my usual spot. Driver's side angled perfectly toward the front entrance of Logie Nest HQ, coffee in hand, car radio low. A light fog hugged the sidewalk, the kind that made everything feel like a movie set right before the climax. I didn't have to wait long. Bryce's Tesla pulled in at exactly 8:03 a.m., late as usual, parked diagonally across two spots, because of course he did. Popped out in a zip-up hoodie with #Logie Next Gen scrawled across the chest, sunglasses on, protein shake in hand. He adjusted his watch like he thought it could tell him how competent he looked. Spoiler, it couldn't. Behind him came the rest of the team, juniors, execs, a few vendors hauling in banners and helium tanks from Madison's weekend rebranding spree. Someone wheeled in a stack of gift bags labeled Nest Up. I nearly choked on my coffee. Then, at 8:09, the city car arrived. Unmarked, beige Crown Vic, dent in the side, government plates. The kind of vehicle that looks like it was designed for bad news. Out stepped Martin, the inspector I'd been hoping for, aviators already on, clipboard in hand, jacket that hadn't been washed since the Obama administration. He didn't say a word, just walked up to the main entrance, peeled the tape off his folder, and pressed a giant orange stopwork order to the glass, dead center, eye level. You couldn't miss it unless you were blind and upside down. The bright vinyl screamed against the glass like a slap in the face. Letters so big you could read them from space. Operations suspended. Permit invalid. License voided pending compliance review. Bryce was halfway through his morning motivational speech to a nearby intern when he noticed. He stopped mid-sentence. His jaw did this little twitchy thing like he'd just bitten into something spoiled. Then he stepped forward, cocky, still thinking this was some kind of mistake. That's when Madison stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots, hair curled within an inch of its life, wearing her branded tracksuit like she was about to coach a corporate soccer team, face twisted as she spotted the sign. "What the hell is this?" she barked. Martin didn't even flinch. He calmly turned the page on his clipboard, then read aloud in a flat, unbothered tone. Effective immediately, all Logie Nest operations are suspended due to failure to maintain a valid, registered compliance designee. No valid designation filed with the city of San Regan since April 18th. He paused, then looked up at them through his mirrored lenses. That's a pretty big problem. A few employees had stopped on the steps, frozen. Phones came out. Someone started filming. One of the interns dropped a tray of branded cupcakes. The helium tanks hissed faintly in the background, rising like confused ghosts. Madison's voice pitched up an octave. "There has to be a mistake. My cousin is the compliance officer." Martin tilted his head just a little. "Ma'am, your cousin isn't registered. There's been no active compliance filing since the previous officer resigned. That makes all operating permits null and void, including your expansion, your shipping license, and your zoning variances." You could actually hear the silence drop. Inside the glass lobby, the lobby lights flickered on. A few contractors were already wheeling out their gear, looking at each other like they'd just walked into the wrong funeral. Bryce looked like he was trying to remember how breathing worked. I watched from my car, sipping slowly, steam curling from the lid. Across the street, the empire they tried to rebrand was crumbling, publicly, professionally, and irreversibly. And the best part, they still hadn't figured out who pulled the pin. But they were about to. The boardroom smelled like sweat, cheap toner, and unraveling egos. The founder slammed the door so hard the blinds rattled. His face was 10 shades redder than usual. His voice hit that growl he reserved for lawsuits and holiday party budgets. "What the hell is going on?" he barked, pacing like a caged dog. "Why is there a goddamn stop work order on my front door? Who let this happen? Legal looked like they wanted to melt into their ergonomic chairs. The general counsel, a man who once proudly declared he skimmed for a living, was pale as printer paper, clutching a folder like it might save his soul. I believe we may have overlooked a filing, he stammered. There was an email from Jennifer a few months ago. He opened the folder and slid the printed copy across the table like it was radioactive. The founder stared at it. She resigned. As compliance, what the hell is this date? April. You're telling me we've been flying blind for months. Nobody answered. The only sound was the faint hum of the AC, trying its best to cool a room full of panic. Then the phone rang. It was the Port Authority. The assistant picked it up, listened for a moment, then slowly handed it to the founder like it was made of glass. He put it on speaker. This is Rachel Sandoval from the Port Authority's Office of Environmental Oversight, the voice said, calm but loaded. We're calling to inform you that your contract renewal has been suspended pending third-party compliance review. Your operating status has been flagged, and we will be conducting an external audit. Founder sputtered, this is a misunderstanding. We have a compliance officer. No, Rachel cut him off. You had a compliance officer. You no longer do, and based on our records, no new designation was ever filed. Until this is resolved, all shipments, approvals, and expansion requests are on hold. Good day, click, silence. It was the kind of silence that felt wet, heavy, embarrassing. Then a voice broke through. One of the junior analysts, probably someone Bryce had ignored in every meeting, spoke up, almost to herself. Isn't Jennifer across the street now? Heads turned. Someone pulled back the blinds. The boardroom had a perfect view of the cafe-lined boulevard, and there it was. A clean, minimal storefront with a matte black sign that read, Civic Core Compliance Solutions. Inside, Jennifer sat at a desk, sleek, composed, no clutter, phone to her ear. They watched as she nodded once, smiled. This is Jennifer, she said, her voice clear through the window. Yes, I'm available for an emergency consult. What's the company name? The blinds snapped shut. The founder was stone still. Bryce looked like he'd just realized his fancy dashboard didn't come with airbags. Madison? She slid her rebrand folder off the table like it might help her disappear. They hadn't just lost a key employee. They'd lost the employee. The one who knew the codes, the cycles, the timing. The one who didn't scream when they shoved her out, because she was already building the exit ramp. And now, she was the only person who could save them. But she didn't need them anymore. They needed her. And the rates for emergency consulting? Let's just say I set them high. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.